Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are plunging into, well, the world of financial regulation here in the UK, and specifically the really complex, fast-moving fight against financial crime. We've got a great set of source materials for this one, including some insights from a platform called FinCrime Intelligence.
Hmm.
So our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We want to get to grips with the UK's financial watchdog. That's the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA. What is it? What does it actually do day to day? Why is it such a critical player? And crucially, how is it trying to tackle this huge challenge of financial crime? We're going to try and pull out the key bits of the material for you. So just to set the scene a bit, the FCA is basically the main body overseeing UK financial markets and, importantly, protecting you, the consumer, within that whole system. It's actually not that old. Set up in 2013, kind of in the aftermath of the financial crisis.
Right. It replaced the old FSA, the Financial Services Authority.
Exactly. And one thing that really stands out from the sources is its independence. It doesn't report to the government day to day, but to the Treasury and Parliament.
Yes, operates independently, and its scope. It's vast.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty staggering. Over 50,000 firms.
That's right. Everything from the big high street banks, insurance companies, investment managers, all the way through to consumer credit firms and the newer fintech companies, too. It covers a lot of ground.
Okay, so it's big. What about its actual goals? The source material mentioned 3 strategic objectives.
Yeah, that's right. They structure their work around these 3 core aims. First, and probably the one most people connect with, is protecting consumers. That's all about making sure firms treat customers fairly, are transparent, clear about what they're selling.
Makes sense.
Second, it's about protecting the integrity of the UK financial system itself. So think deterring financial crime, market stability, fair competition, keeping the system sound.
Right, the wider picture.
Exactly. And that leads into the third one. Promoting effective competition. They actually want to encourage innovation, lower barriers for new firms to enter the market. The idea being that competition ultimately benefits consumers. And underpinning all this, the sources mention a principles-based approach. Risk-based supervision, proportionality.
Why that way? Why not just hard and fast rules for everything?
Well, the thinking is it allows for more flexibility. The market's incredibly complex, constantly changing, right? A rigid, purely rules-based system might struggle to keep up or could stifle innovation. This way, they set principles, and firms have to figure out how to meet them effectively based on their specific risks. It demands more judgment, but arguably fits a dynamic market better.
Okay, I get the objectives and the approach, but how do they actually make firms, do this stuff? What teeth do they
They
have?
have quite significant powers, actually, as detailed in the sources. For a start, they authorize firms and key individuals. You can't just set up shop and offer regulated financial services. You need the FCA's approval.
Gatekeepers, essentially.
Precisely. And they set the conduct standards, the detailed rules firms have to follow. Then, crucially, if things go wrong, they investigate. They can dig into breaches, figure out what happened, and their enforcement powers are extensive. We're talking public censures, imposing multi-million-pound fines,
Right.
banning individuals from working in finance again. So real consequences. Their supervision isn't just reactive either. They do proactive assessments, looking at how firms manage risks. And these thematic reviews you mentioned, where they pick a specific issue, like maybe how firms handle complaints or a particular financial crime risk, and look at it across a whole sector.
And what sort of things are they constantly looking out for during that supervision?
The material lists several key areas. AML, anti-money laundering, and CTF counter-terrorist financing controls are right up there.
Yeah.
Huge focus. Also market abuse, like insider trading, making sure markets are fair. Fair treatment of customers is another big one, especially around financial promotions, making sure advertising isn't misleading. And they look closely at governance, the firm's culture, and whether the senior managers really have a grip on things. Oversight is critical.
And sanctions compliance, too, I see mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. Ensuring firms comply with UK sanctions regimes and report correctly is definitely on their radar.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's pivot a bit and really dig into that financial crime angle, because as you said, it's a huge focus. And this is where the FinCrime intelligence part of our source material really comes into play, right?
Yeah.
It highlights how central this fight is for the FCA.
It absolutely is. It's woven into everything they expect from firms.
Mm.
There's a pretty dense regulatory framework firms just have to follow. At the core are the UK's AML regulations. These are designed to align with global standards, like those from the FATF, the Financial Action Task
Which is the
Force.
international body.
Exactly, and these UK regs draw their power from major laws like the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, the Terrorism Act 2000, and the Money Laundering Regulations 2017. And those regulations get updated, amended to try and keep pace with the criminals.
So what does the FCA actually expect firms to be doing on the ground?
The sources lay out some very clear expectations. First off, robust customer due diligence CDD. Basically, know your customer, verify who they are, understand what they're likely to do.
And sometimes more than that, EDD.
Right, enhanced due diligence for higher risk customers or situations, going deeper. Then effective transaction monitoring, systems to spot unusual patterns, things that don't fit. And crucially, when they spot something suspicious, they must file a suspicious activity report, a SAR, with the National Crime Agency. That's a legal duty.
Okay.
Beyond that, firms need to do regular risk assessments, look at their own products, services, customer base, where are the vulnerabilities to financial crime. They also have to appoint a specific person, a money laundering reporting officer or MLRO, someone senior who's responsible for overseeing all this.
So there's accountability.
Yes, clear accountability.
Yeah.
And finally, ongoing staff training. Everyone needs to understand the risks, know the red flags. You can have the best systems, but if staff aren't trained, things get missed.
And this complexity, this constant evolution, is presumably why platforms like FinCrime Intelligence exist and why they're in our source material.
Exactly. Professionals need resources to navigate this. FinCrime Intelligence focuses on, well, the whole spectrum: fraud, money laundering, cybercrime, trying to get around sanctions, terrorist financing, bribery, corruption. It's a long list.
And it's fascinating to look at the specific examples that platform highlights, the trending now and recent article sections. It brings it home, doesn't it? We're talking InfoSealer malware leaking 1.7 billion passwords.
Just staggering numbers.
Criminals using AI in their schemes, hackers shifting focus to things like Apple IDs, worries about biometric data security, these really sophisticated phone scams, even fraud happening on Facebook.
Yeah, it shows the sheer variety and the technological edge criminals are often exploiting.
So how do those specific, almost ripped from the headlines threats connect back to what the FCA expects firms to do, the CDD, the monitoring?
They connect directly. They're the reason those controls are needed. Take that massive password leak. How does a firm reliably check someone's identity online if their password might be compromised? Robust CDD becomes even more critical. You need multiple layers, perhaps biometrics, though, as you mentioned, even that isn't foolproof.
Right.
Transaction monitoring systems need to be smart enough to pick up the patterns associated with, say, APP fraud, authorized push payment fraud, where someone is tricked into sending money. That's a big focus for the FCA, as the sources note. Or spotting funds moving that originated from a Facebook marketplace scam or cybercrime proceeds.
The training.
Absolutely vital. Staff need to recognize the social engineering tactics used in sophisticated phone scams, or how criminals might try to open accounts using fake identities derived from data breaches. And the AI point is interesting, too. Criminals using AI means firms need to explore using AI and machine learning in their own compliance reg tech, as it's called. The FCA is actually encouraging this kind of innovation.
So it's a constant arms race.
It really is. And when firms drop the ball, the FCA steps in. The sources are clear about the consequences. We're talking huge fines. Millions of pounds aren't uncommon. Individuals can be banned. And the reputational damage can be immense. High-profile cases, which the material alludes to, often involve failings in basic AML systems, mis-selling products, or not protecting consumers properly, all directly related to managing the risks highlighted by those specific crime examples.
It definitely sounds like a tough battle. But you mentioned the FCA is also looking at innovation itself, not just reacting to criminal innovation, things like the regulatory sandbox.
Yes, they're trying to foster innovation in a controlled way. The regulatory sandbox is a good example. It lets firms, often fintechs or those developing regtech, test out new products or services with real customers, but under the FCA's close watch and within defined limits.
So innovation with guardrails.
Exactly. It helps new ideas develop without immediately falling foul of regulations that maybe weren't designed with that specific tech in mind. And tech sprints are another tool, short, intense events bringing people together, regulators, tech firms, industry experts to brainstorm solutions to specific regulatory challenges, often using new tech.
So they see tech as part of the solution, not just the problem.
Definitely. They recognize that in this digital age, technology is crucial for effective compliance, too.
And looking ahead, what does the source material suggest the FCA is focusing on for the future?
Several key themes emerge. Digital finance, generally, cryptocurrencies, digital payments, all that. Operational resilience is another big one, making sure firms can withstand shocks and disruptions like cyber attacks.
ESG. That seems to be everywhere now.
Yes, environmental, social, and governance factors, ensuring firms are making appropriate disclosures and managing those risks. And AI, as we discussed, both its risks and its potential benefits for compliance. There's also a mention, naturally, of the post-Brexit context. The expectation seems to be that the FCA might take a more UK-tailored, perhaps more agile approach in some areas.
But still keeping standards high.
Oh, absolutely. While maintaining those international standards and, crucially, international cooperation, financial crime is global, so regulators have to work together.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, the listener. Why does all this matter? Understanding the FCA, this whole fight against financial crime. Why should you care?
Well, on one level, it's about the stability of the whole system you rely on every day. Your bank, your pension provider, your insurer, the FCA oversees them to make sure they're run properly and aren't, likely to collapse.
That's fundamental.
And on a more direct personal level, their work is about protecting you from being ripped off by scams, from unfair treatment, from the fallout of data breaches like the ones we discussed.
Those sophisticated phone scams, the online fraud.
Exactly. The standards the FCA sets for firms and the action they take when those standards aren't met, that's your main line of defense against criminals trying to get your money or steal your identity.
So a lot to think about there. Any final thought you leave our listeners with based on everything we've covered from the sources today?
Hmm. I think what really strikes me is the tension highlighted by the materials. On the one hand, you have the FCA, the regulatory framework it's established, based on laws, international agreements, detailed rules, and expectations. It has process. On the other hand, you have the picture painted by FinCrime intelligence criminals who are incredibly fast, adaptive, using cutting-edge tech like AI, exploiting social media, finding new angles all the time. So the question I'd leave you with is, how can regulation, which inherently moves more methodically, truly keep pace with adversaries who innovate constantly and operate without rules? What does that inherent dynamic, that ongoing arms race between the regulators trying to build defenses and the criminals trying to find ways around them, mean for the future, for the security of the whole financial system, and ultimately for your own financial safety in an increasingly digital world?
A challenging question indeed.
Yeah.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.